Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Now it is Saturday afternoon, the kids are out playing and the animals are everywhere, and it's really windy, so I don't know how well the sound's going to be and the voiceover, and it's sunny and it's the wrong time of day. But anyway, I found time to do it. So I was hoping to get videos out every day for like a week or two to try and bump up the videos that I hadn't managed to get out because I'd been so sick with laryngitis and stuff. But I didn't manage it because doing these voiceovers really, I have to really set aside time to do it, and at the moment I'm struggling to get that to happen. I really need somewhere that I can go to do it easily. The garden is where I end up, but it's not the easiest space to do it. But anyway, so I'm a bit late on getting the videos out, even though I had wanted to do it, but that's just life. So videos that we're currently doing at the moment are the food prep, meal planning, preserving and all that sort of thing post the 6-week grocery haul, quick rundown, family of 8, off-grid, 4 hours away from our shopping. So I go every 6 weeks and I do our groceries at Coles, Woolworths, Aldi, fruit and veg, butcher, Costco and all that sort of thing. Stay at 2 nights at my mum's place while I'm doing that whole process once every 6 weeks. By doing this, we have managed to reduce our grocery bill because we're not just using things for the sake of it. We use everything that we purchase in a more thoughtful manner, and towards the end of the month we use up whatever we've got left no matter what, because that's what there is. Our grocery budget is still okay. Like, we still have, it is where most of our funds go to, so we don't, whilst we are somewhat frugal in that I like everything to be used for a purpose and everything to get used and things not to get wasted and stuff like that, we still spend a pretty decent amount of food. The budget ends up being about $2,200 for 6 weeks for the 8 of us, which breaks down to around about $2 a meal per person per day. However, that budget also includes all our shampoos, toothpaste, soaps, dish detergents, laundry detergents, anything that's required in that kind of thing as well. So all the personal type stuff there. We do a bulk food haul about every 6 months through Honest to Goodness, which is normally about the $600 mark. So say $100 a month extra there. And we do spice orders, probably about the same every 3 to 6 months, which is a couple of $100 too. So another $20, $30 there. And we get the food hamper. A4 Community Care does a food bank, food pantry type hamper thing. We pay $50 for that once a month as well. So it ends up probably $2,350, $2,400 per 6 week, probably a bit less than that, $2,300 maybe per 6 week period for the 8 of us. And that's within what we can afford and budget and still do what we need to do. Having the income from YouTube has obviously helped because it covers a large portion of our grocery budget these days, or it allows me to use basically I'm using the YouTube income at the moment to do the garden. Basically. That was another reason to try and get these videos out. Obviously my income this month is going to be a bit lower because I didn't do all those videos in the beginning of the month, so I'm trying to make up for it a little bit towards the end, but you know, it is what it is. So this is part 3 of August's meal and food prep, so I started breaking it down into a couple of days per video. So this is part 3, and then I will probably voice over part 4 as well directly afterwards. So it's just, that's how it ends up happening lately, is I end up voiceovering 2 of them to have their setup inside so that I can sort the videos out and get them out. So part 3 first up. So because our fridges carked it in the middle of the month, and then we had problems with storing stuff and things like that, some of the stuff that we had in the fridge had to be thrown out. There just wasn't anything we could do about it. There was no way to get it somewhere safe at a safe temperature for a while there. Certain things got damaged. I mentioned my kefir grains last video that we got a bit of the calm yeast, however it's pronounced, K-A-H-M yeast, in the top of the grains, and I had to throw out a whole lot of those grains. A couple of other things I had to throw out was some ferments, some fermented chilies, and we had some fermented lemons, preserved lemons, and then I had to throw out what was left of the lemon chung that we had. So lemon chung is a macerated lemon syrup. It's a Korean condiment. And we like to use it drizzled over fried chicken, over rice and stuff, or in things. I like to use it as a syrup in things. We really enjoy it, and I had to throw out what was left of it because we just couldn't hold it. So I purposely bought a couple of bags of lemons this month. They weren't overly expensive, but they weren't overly cheap either, but it was purely for this dish. So what you have to do is you have to slice your lemons really nice and thin. You want to discard the little knobbly bits at the ends that have the excess rind and pith on them, and you want to get rid of any seeds that are in the lemons as you're slicing them. I was really lucky these lemons pretty much were seedless. There was a few seeds in a couple of bags, but not very many at all. So I got rid of all the seeds, got rid of the knobbly bits on the ends of them, and then had the really nice fine slices. You want to try and get thin-skinned lemons if you can, because they're going to have less pith on them as well. You know, those thick ones that have the really thick layer of pith, they're not going to be so great for this because the pith is going into the jars as well, and it does have those bitter overtones. The way it's made is really simple and really wonderful, but it is basically a lemon syrup, so you could just juice all your lemons and do equal parts lemon juice, equal parts sugar, and you've got a very similar sort of a overall flavor profile. But doing it this way is really kind of neat, and it gives you those lemon slices to use for something else too. I think that the lemon slices dehydrated would be really nice to then use in tea, because they're like sweetened lemon slices, so I'm going to try and give that a go this particular round as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to put equal parts in weight of sugar and sliced lemons into the jars in alternating layers. So here I am using these are the ghee jars from the new ghee that I get from Costco. So they're a 1.35 litre jar. So I weighed out how much the lemon slices were, and then weighed out equal parts of sugar as well. And then all I did was I layered in the slices of lemon, poured some sugar over, pushed it down, slices of lemon, sugar, slices of lemon, and so on and so forth. So what's going to happen is that as the sugar is touching all the layers of lemon, it's going to dissolve, and it's going to macerate in that fruit, or the fruit's going to macerate in the sugar. And the sugar is going to end up drawing the lemon juice out of the lemon slices as well, and then you'll have this lovely syrup. So over the next few days, I think I show it in a few times over the next few videos, but I will make sure in one of my chat videos to show you a finished jar as well. But over the next 3 to 5 days, you leave it on the bench, you tip it upside down and backwards and forwards every now and again if there's some sugar that's crystallized in the bottom of the jar, because that sometimes happens, is that you get a little bit of a build-up of the crystals in the bottom of the jar. There just hasn't been enough lemon juice in contact with it to dissolve it. And then so you sometimes tip the jars upside down to let that sugar sort of go back through the lemon slices and tip it back the other way. You can add a bit more lemon juice to it if you need to, or the lemon slices do compress a little bit the longer it's sitting in there, so you can add a few fresh lemon slices on top of the jar as it sinks a little bit too. So a few days on the shelf, on the counter, and I put it right in front of me so that when I'm doing other things I can just tip it backwards and forwards to get it all to go. And then after those few days, all you've got is this lemon liquid, and you stick it straight in the fridge. We just store it in the fridge just as is. It does get a little more bitter the longer it sits, and I assume that's because the lemon pith and stuff is sitting in there as well. So I did think that last time maybe I should hang all the lemon slices in some cheesecloth or something to get as much of the syrup off them as possible. And then, as I said, I thought maybe dehydrating the lemon slices for use in teas and things like that would be really nice. So we'll see how we go with this batch, but for the moment we were just making it up. The next thing I got done was I seasoned the flour for the buttermilk chicken. So on the last video I had put the chicken thighs in chunks into a seasoned buttermilk marinade into the fridge. But instead of buttermilk I had used our milk kefir with some garlic and pepper and salt and stuff. So now I'm going to make a seasoned flour mix to dip that chicken into. So I just added the usual stuff, the paprika, garlic, onion, salt, pepper into the flour, and whisked it all up so that the flour was well seasoned. I fried off the chicken. This is only the second time I've made buttermilk chicken, and so last time I looked at a whole bunch of recipes and decided what I did and didn't want to do and how I wanted to do it. And last time when I was reading, a lot of people put liquid into their flour before coating the chicken and things like that. I decided not to do that last time, and it worked well. So what I'm trying to do is when you pick up the pieces out of the marinade, I take some liquid with it and I put it in the flour, and then that way it's creating those flaky bits of flour which are sort of batter, and you're pressing them onto the chicken so that when they cook they have that flaky texture around the outside of it. They end up sort of crispy, and the batter has sort of a flaky texture to it. So I found that I didn't need to add liquid to the flour specifically for that purpose. All I did was I didn't sort of wipe the chicken off particularly well. I just threw it in the flour, and it gave the same kind of effect, and made sure to sort of press that stuff onto the chicken as well, so that it was working in a manner that created those flaky parts of the chicken. And then we just fried it off in a few inches of oil in the pan, and I just use vegetable oil. It's a cold pressed vegetable oil that I get from Costco to deep fry anything like this for us, because that works well. and then I strain it and store it to use it a few times before it gets discarded if it gets too burnt or anything like that. And then we fried it off, and I don't think I showed at all where we served it, but it would have just been served with our standard with mashed potato, frozen steamed veg, or broccoli if we've got excess broccoli and that sort of thing on with as normal, so chicken and veg for dinner. The next day, one of the things that I had to get through was the last tray of chicken breasts. So I only bought 2 trays of chicken breasts this month, and I've gotten through one, and this is the second one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to velvet this chicken, and we're going to use it stir fry, and what we don't use for a stir fry for dinner will be used for other purposes. So velveting the chicken is I don't know whether it's Chinese, Asian, it's an Eastern thing to do. It's usually used with like Chinese foods and things like that, and it is to tenderize the chicken before you cook it. There are different methods of velveting, like some people use bicarb and things like that. The traditional method is just to use a starch of some sort with a soy sauce or an oyster sauce. So I like to use potato starch because that's what we have. We have cornstarch generally speaking as well, but we always have potato starch because I use that in my hot chocolate powders and things like that. So I use potato starch, and my choice of sauce is oyster sauce for these. So you're going to do around about a 1/4 cup of water, a tablespoon of starch, and a tablespoon of oyster sauce with a little drizzle of oil per kilo of chicken. So you cut up your chicken, you want to make sure that you cut it across the grain, obviously nice and thin. Put it in a bowl, add your water and let the chicken absorb that water, then add your starch, your oyster sauce and your drizzle of oil and mix it through well. You want to leave it for at least 20 minutes, but it doesn't hurt it to sit any longer. If you were using like bicarb or something, you wouldn't want to let it sit for an extended period of time, but by using the starches, you can pretty much leave it for as long as you need to leave it. It needs a minimum of sort of 20 minutes, but you can just leave it in the fridge for however long you need it to sit before you're going to cook it. And then you just fry it off and use it however you want. So I fried all mine off after the waiting period. I just fried it all off in the cast iron pan so that we could use some for dinner and some for something else the next day. The next thing I wanted to do was make some biscuits. So it's really nice to have some biscuits in the house to have with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something like that. I've been using a lot of egg yolks lately. I make my mayo with the egg yolks. I make that ramen dish with the egg yolks and end up with a fair few egg whites. And sometimes the egg whites just go to the dogs with their dinner. Sometimes they get just added to other eggs to use as scrambled eggs the next morning. But I held on to a few to make some biscuits with. So I made these Italian style almond biscuits. They're sort of similar to a macaron, and I have been known to make macarons, but they are kind of fiddly and they do, you can stuff them up quite easily. So I wanted to, wanted something a little bit more simple. Macarons also are a lot of sugar to not a lot of, substance. I have managed to make them here in this weather on my barbecue. I'll put a photo in because I was quite proud of managing to get really nice feet on them. But yeah, it wasn't something that I really wanted to do. So when I was Googling with egg whites and biscuits and stuff, you can make coconut macaroons, and they're fine, but there's quite a few people here who are just not overly fond of coconut on its own, which is basically what they are. It's just clusters of coconut stuck together with a bit of icing, sugar and egg white. So I don't tend to make them very often. These biscuits are, I can't remember what they were called, I'll have to look them up, but they're basically a macaron but with more almond flour in ratio to it, so that they end up more of a dough than what a macaron ends up being. So all I did was I whisked the egg whites up in the KitchenAid until they were pretty stiff peaks, and then I added icing sugar spoonful by spoonful while still whisking it. I only tend to buy raw sugar, that whole single ingredient household, so I tend to buy raw sugar and turn that into whatever I need. So I just stuck it in a cup on the TriBest personal blender and ground it down to a really fine sugar, between a caster sugar and an icing sugar, to be able to add to the egg whites. And while the egg whites were whisking, I just added a teaspoonful at a time into the egg whites to incorporate that till it's nice and glossy and still maintains that sort of stiff peak type thing. Once it was all whisked through, I folded in the almond meal. So as I said, it was a lot higher ratio of almond meal to egg whites than like a macaron is. A macaron's sort of a thin, you have to pipe it because it's sort of a thin dough. This is a handleable dough. I did add some of that lemon syrup because it was sitting on the bench. So this was day 2 of the lemon chung, so there was a lot of syrup on the top. So I did add a couple of spoonfuls of that, but I think I'd need far more in it to allow that flavour to go through. bit concerned about adding too much liquid into the dough and not being sure how to compensate for it. Now that I've made it, I could probably add more liquid and be aware of how I need to compensate and what texture it needs to be. So I put some in there, but it probably needs a fair bit more to get some really good flavour in there. I rolled the dough into balls and placed them on the silicone. The dough isn't overly sticky, but it is a bit tacky, so wetting your hands slightly can help to make it a bit more handleable. And I just sprinkled some slivered almonds on the top and pushed them down slightly. The biscuits aren't going to spread, so whatever shape you put them on the tray is basically the shape that they're going to be when they're cooked. This is what they looked like when they were cooked. They're still reminiscent of a macaron, but a bit more dense. So they still have that chewy, almondy, sugary flavour, but they're just a bit more dense. I think they're a great plain base biscuit that could be altered to a variety of flavours and a good way to use up those excess egg whites. I think I could do most crushed nuts with it. I think crushed walnuts would probably be quite nice in there as well. And I don't think the texture of the nuts would have to be too fine either. Like I used the Kirkland's almond flour in this, which is what I have to use if I'm making macarons. But if it was more almond meal texture, like if I ground up my own almonds, I think that would be fine too. I think you could probably add a bit of cocoa in there as well and make them sort of chocolate flavoured. And I might try some other essences in there as well and see how that goes in flavour. But I think it's a really good use of the egg whites. I did make a second tray up and reduce the size a little bit. I could probably reduce them even just slightly more, so they're like those little, you know, the little one-bite cookies that you get served on a saucer when you order a coffee at a coffee shop, because that was sort of what I was aiming for. These little bite-sized biscuits that you can have 2 of them when you have your coffee at night, because Darryl and I always like to have a pot of tea or a coffee or something of an evening after dinner, and just something like that to have with that would be really nice. So I think I could make them really small. I could potentially put some different nuts in them, maybe some cocoa. I could potentially even get to them to a point of being almost a chocolate chip cookie, I reckon. I reckon I could fiddle with this recipe a lot, and it'll be, and you know, it's dairy free, it's gluten free, and it just, I think it'll work for a lot of things, and it's a good way to use those egg whites. We go through a lot of mayo, and I prefer to use egg yolks only in my mayo, so we do always have a fair few egg whites, so it's not, you know, it'd be a nice easy thing. And egg whites always whisk up better if they're aged for a day too, so if I put them into a specific bowl into the fridge and then I use them the next day, that works really well for whisking them up too. For dinner that night we had our standard stir fry. I have no idea why I don't have more footage of it. Maybe I didn't put it all together, I don't know. Maybe I was just too tired at the end of the day. But it was to use up more of the broccoli that needed using, some of the cabbage, any Asian greens that were left and all that sort of thing. We always use the Aldi noodles that just require heating and boiling water, and we use the velveted chicken. I don't know why I don't have any footage of cooking that off either, I'm not sure. The record button on my camera is a little temperamental at the moment, and I have been known to hit record, do the things, then go back to it to hit record to stop it, and it hasn't even started recording. I would like to replace the big camera that I've got with a slightly smaller vlogging camera at some point so that I can maneuver it a little bit easier and it's a little bit more suited. But for the moment, what I've got works, and that's what we're working with because it's an unnecessary expense when I've got something that works. We use the Recipe 10 Eats stir fry sauce or variations of it for our noodle stir fry. It depends on, sometimes we're missing some of the ingredients or whatever, so we make it work. It's a combination of soy sauce, oyster sauce, Shushing wine, sesame oil, some cornstarch. We always add water to it and shake it up to add it to the noodles, and all we do is we cook off all the meat and veggies, add the noodles to the pot, and then we pour the sauce over the top and mix it through until it gets all nice and shiny. The only thing I miss is the flat rice noodles. It tastes so much like a standard Chinese stir fry that you buy at a Chinese when you go and eat Chinese. It's a really good mix of flavors and has a really nice texture. It has that sticky, not quite sticky, sort of the oily sort of a texture that Chinese noodles tend to have. The only thing, and I don't miss Chinese noodles because we make this and it's so close to it. The only thing I really miss is the flat rice noodles. So my choice of noodle if I go to a noodle store is either crispy chow mein noodles or ho fun flat rice noodles, the fried ones. And I have yet to master making rice noodles. I've watched lots of things where you can steam your own rice noodles and slice them up, and it's all just a bit too much effort. And I've yet to find anywhere that sells them fresh. And I just don't find the dried ones really come even close to eating to the ones that you buy made at a Chinese store. They're they don't have the same texture at all. So I'd really like to manage to find an Asian store that sells some fresh or frozen that I could try, but I haven't managed to do it yet. So that is the only thing I missed with that. So that was the next couple of days of August. Obviously I missed some footage at the end there of that stir fry. I'll put a photo in of what the stir fry looks like because we make it all the time, so anyone who's watched before has seen it. But the stir fry sauce is well worth making from Recipe Tin Eats. It is a really nice sauce for that. So hope everyone enjoyed watching, and I will see you on the next video.